I still remember the first time I heard someone say, "What's meant for you will always find its way back." It was a simple phrase shared by an old friend over a cup of coffee on a rainy afternoon, and yet it stuck with me like a warm light in a dark room. Maybe you've felt that way too, like the blessings you've lost, the dreams that seemed to slip away, weren't gone forever. They were just waiting for the right time, the right moment to circle back to you. This is a story about that kind of wealth, the kind they tried to take from you, the kind you thought you'd never see again. But now, it's coming back, and it's bringing something deeper with it, a sense of justice, of restoration, of peace that whispers, "It was always yours." Today, we're going to talk about how to recognize those signs, because they're closer than you think. We'll explore real stories of people who saw what was stolen come back in unexpected ways, and the simple shifts they made to open the door for it. We'll talk about the quiet power of patience, the importance of staying alert, and how even in the smallest of signals, there's a message that's meant just for you. So take a deep breath and let this story wrap around you like a soft blanket, because the wealth they tried to steal is circling back. And in the quiet spaces of your life, there's a message waiting just for you to hear. Watch for the sign. It's already begun. Wealth isn't always measured in dollar bills or bank statements. Sometimes it's something much bigger, like a sense of belonging, a second chance, or the quiet knowing that your name is still written in places you haven't yet seen. I've seen it happen more times than I can count. My neighbor Tom is a perfect example. He was a small-town mechanic for most of his life, never one to chase after big dreams. But after a rough divorce and some bad luck at work, he thought everything he'd built was gone for good. He moved away for a while, trying to start over, but nothing seemed to stick. Then, out of the blue, he got a letter in the mail. It was from a pension fund he'd forgotten he even had. Money he'd paid in decades ago, when he was just starting out. That little nest egg wasn't huge, but it was enough to pay off his debts and give him a fresh start. "I thought I'd lost everything," he told me, but it turns out I'd been investing in my future all along. That's what I mean when I say lost wealth can find its way back. It's not always about a check in the mailbox. It's about realizing that what you put into the world, the energy you share, doesn't just disappear. It circles back when you least expect it. The lesson here is simple, but powerful. Don't count yourself out just because the world seemed to move on. What was meant for you has a way of waiting, sometimes in places you'd never look, sometimes in ways that feel too quiet to notice. So as we keep going, I want you to hold on to this truth. The wealth that belongs to you can't be taken by anyone else. It's tied to your name, your story, and your quiet strength. Let's talk next about how to start noticing the small signals that tell you it's closer than you think. Have you ever felt like the world was trying to tell you something through the little signs and small coincidences that keep popping up in your life? Maybe it's a number you keep seeing, a song that plays every time you turn on the radio, or a letter in the mail that seems to arrive at just the right moment. These aren't just random happenings. They're often the gentle nudges that let you know something bigger is at work. My friend Ellen had one of those moments not long ago. She'd been cleaning out her attic, going through old boxes she hadn't touched in years. In one of them, she found a slip of paper from a savings account she'd opened decades ago and forgotten about completely. That same week, she started seeing the same number 777 on license plates, receipts, even her digital clock. At first, I thought I was just being silly, she said. But after the third or fourth time, I felt like maybe it was more than just a coincidence. When she finally checked on that old savings account, it turned out there was a small sum there, enough to cover a long overdue trip to see her family out of state. She said it felt like a quiet blessing, a little sign that what she'd once set aside was still there, waiting for her. The lesson is this: the signs are usually soft, but they're always there if we're willing to look. They're like breadcrumbs on a forest path, guiding us back to what's meant for us. And the more we notice them, the more we're able to step into the opportunities they lead us to. So, as we move into the next part of this story, I invite you to start paying attention to the little things that seem to glow around the edges of your day, because they're often the first whispers that something bigger is coming back, something that has your name written all over it. Next, let's talk about why it's so important to protect these signs and the miracles they're connected to by guarding them with the quiet power of your silence. Silence can feel like an empty space, but it's often the place where the most powerful things begin. When a sign comes your way, when you feel that quiet nudge that says, "This is for you," the best thing you can do is hold it close for a little while, like a secret you're not quite ready to share. My friend Marjorie taught me that. A few years ago, she was offered a chance to buy a little shop she'd dreamed about for years. It wasn't much, just a tiny antique store tucked away on a side street. But she knew deep down it was meant for her. The catch: the opportunity came quietly, and she felt like shouting it from the rooftops. But instead, she sat with it, prayed on it, thought about it, and only told the people she trusted most. "I didn't want to risk talking myself out of it, or letting someone else talk me out of it," she said. Marjorie told me that in those weeks of quiet, she felt the idea growing stronger, more certain. By the time she signed the lease, it felt like she was stepping into a story that had been waiting for her all along. And she's convinced that the silence, those days of reflection and trust, were what allowed the miracle to bloom. Here's the lesson: not every blessing is meant to be shouted from the rooftops. Sometimes the most powerful miracles are the ones you nurture in the quiet, away from the noise of other people's opinions. Because in that silence, you can hear your own heart more clearly. And that's where real faith lives. So as we move forward, I want you to remember that your quiet doesn't make you weak, it makes you wise. And in the next part of this story, we'll talk about how that quiet can actually protect you from the invisible battles that surround every blessing, even the ones that come wrapped in kindness. Some of the fiercest battles we'll ever fight won't be against other people. They'll be the quiet, invisible wars that go on inside us. The fear that we're not worthy of the blessings coming our way. The worry that what's been given can just as easily be taken. And sometimes the doubts that whisper, "This is too good to be true." My friend Paul went through one of those seasons a few years back. He'd worked for decades at the same factory, always the one to stay late and help out whenever he was needed. But when the factory shut down, he was left feeling like everything he'd built had slipped away. For months, he wrestled with feelings of failure until one day, he got a call from a former coworker. "I've been working on a project," the man said. "I think there's a place for you if you're willing to take a chance." Paul almost said no. He told me later, "It felt like I'd already lost so much. How could I trust this was real?" But he decided to listen, just for a moment, to the part of him that still believed he was worth more than his circumstances. That little spark of faith gave him the courage to say yes. And it turned out to be the best decision he'd ever made. Here's the truth: financial favor doesn't just show up in your bank account. It shows up in your courage to believe you're worthy of it. And that courage can be the difference between missing out and stepping into something that changes everything. So if you've ever felt like there's a battle going on inside you, between the part that wants to believe and the part that's afraid, it's okay. You're not alone. And that battle is a sign that what's coming is bigger than you can see right now. As we keep moving forward, let's talk about something just as important as recognizing those battles, learning to recognize the people around us who might be pulling us back without even knowing it. It's a funny thing, isn't it? How sometimes the people closest to us, the ones we thought would be cheering the loudest, are the very ones who seem to grow quiet when we start to step into something new. That's because financial blessings and opportunities don't just reveal what's possible for us. They reveal what others might still be hiding in themselves. My neighbor Janet went through this not long ago. She'd always been the steady one, the friend who listened and encouraged everyone else. But when she started a little side business selling homemade candles, things took off faster than she expected. Instead of feeling proud, a few of her oldest friends started making little jokes, comments that sounded supportive on the surface, but were heavy with something else. "Must be nice," they'd say, or "Don't forget us little people when you're rich." Janet told me it hurt more than she expected. "I thought they'd be happy for me," she said. But after a while, she realized their comments weren't really about her. They were about the fears they carried inside themselves, and she decided that wasn't her burden to carry. Here's the lesson: sometimes the people who can't celebrate with you aren't meant to walk every part of your journey with you. It doesn't mean you love them any less. It just means you don't have to let their doubts become your doubts. So, if you're starting to notice little hints of jealousy, or even quiet resistance from those around you, remember this: your blessing is yours. You don't need to apologize for it. You don't need to dim your light to make them feel more comfortable, because what's meant for you can never be taken by someone else's envy. It's tied to your name, not theirs. And as we move into the next part of our story, I want to show you how the very things that once felt like losses might actually be making room for something even better. Let's explore what happens when old opportunities circle back in ways you never saw coming. It's funny how life can surprise us, isn't it? Just when we think something is gone for good, an opportunity, a relationship, even a piece of our confidence, it has a way of circling back in the most unexpected ways. My Uncle Larry used to work for a small printing company that went under in the late 80s. It was a hard time. He lost his job and had to start over with nothing but a stack of unpaid bills and a lot of quiet prayers. For years, he carried that weight around, thinking it was all just a closed door. But then, decades later, he got a call out of nowhere. A former co-worker had bought the old printing equipment and was starting up a new shop. I always remembered how careful you were with the machines. The man said, "I could really use your help." Larry told me. I almost didn't believe it. It felt like the job I'd lost all those years ago was coming back around, like it never really left. And you know what? That small opportunity became the start of his retirement income. It wasn't flashy, but it was more than enough to bring him peace of mind and a sense of purpose again. Here's what that taught me. What's meant for you doesn't disappear. Even when it feels like it's slipped through your fingers, it has a way of waiting, like the tide that always returns to the shore. The things that belong to you, your skills, your passions, your quiet faith, will find their way back when the timing is right. So as you think about the parts of your life that feel lost or overlooked, remember this: they might just be resting. And when they come back, they're often stronger, wiser, and even more ready to serve you than they were before. As we keep moving forward, I want to remind you that the reason these blessings come back isn't just luck. It's something much deeper. It's because your name has been written somewhere that no one else can erase. Let's talk next about how that spiritual record of your worth has been kept safe all along, even when you forgot it yourself. There's a quiet power in knowing that your worth doesn't disappear, even when the world seems to move on without you. It's like there's a record somewhere, a ledger that doesn't just count your dollars, but your intentions, your kindness, the ways you showed up when no one else was watching. My friend Mary shared a story with me that always stuck in my heart. She'd spent most of her life working in a tiny grocery store, just enough to keep food on the table for her kids. There were days when she felt invisible, like her efforts didn't matter in the grand scheme of things. But years later, one of those kids, now grown and successful, stood up at a family gathering and said, Everything I know about hard work, I learned from watching you, Mom. In that moment, Mary told me she realized her name had been written in something bigger than any paycheck or job title. That's what I call the spiritual ledger, the place where your true wealth is kept safe. It's not about what the world says you're worth. It's about the quiet ways you've invested in others, the courage you've shown in getting back up again, the love you've given without asking for anything in return. Here's the lesson. What you've poured out into the world hasn't been lost. It's been multiplied. Even if you can't see the return yet, it's there, growing roots in the lives you've touched and in the quiet spaces of your own soul. So as we keep going, I want to invite you to see your financial journey not just as a list of deposits and withdrawals, but as a story that's still being written. And in the next part of that story, let's talk about what you can do, practically and spiritually, to start welcoming back the wealth that's been waiting for you all along. One of the most beautiful truths about life is that miracles often meet us in the small, simple things we do. It's not always about the grand gestures or the big risks. It's about the little steps we take to show that we're ready to receive what's already ours. My friend George learned that in the most unexpected way. He'd been feeling stuck for a long time, like no matter what he did, things just weren't moving. But one morning, he decided to do something he'd been putting off for years. He opened up an old file cabinet and started sorting through the papers he'd been avoiding. In the very back, he found a letter from a credit union he'd long forgotten about. An account with just enough money to pay off a nagging bill that had been keeping him up at night. It wasn't a fortune, he told me, but it felt like a sign, like life was saying, see, there's still something here for you. That small action, just opening a drawer, became the first step towards something bigger. It gave him hope again, and he started looking for other small ways to clear the path for the blessings that had been waiting. Here's the lesson: when you take even the smallest action, checking an account, making a call, asking a question, you're showing the world and yourself that you're open for what's next. You're making room for wealth to find its way back. So if you've been feeling stuck, I want you to remember that your next step doesn't have to be huge. It just has to be faithful, because the quiet actions you take today can unlock doors you never even knew were there. As we keep moving forward, let's talk about why your blessings don't just matter for you. They matter for the people you love, the legacy you're building, and the lives you'll touch along the way. Sometimes, even when the signs are clear and the doors are opening, there's still a part of us that hesitates. Doubt can be like a quiet fog, creeping in and making everything feel uncertain. And it's in those moments that the greatest battle of all begins, the one between your faith and your fear. My friend Ruth went through that when she was offered a chance to buy the little flower shop she'd worked at for years. It was everything she'd wanted, a chance to own the place she'd poured so much love into. But she told me, I almost didn't do it. I kept thinking, what if it's a mistake? What if I fail? Those doubts felt bigger than the opportunity itself. But one evening, she sat down with a cup of tea and wrote out all the reasons she was worthy of that blessing. The years she'd spent learning the business, the way she made every customer feel welcome, the care she put into every bouquet. She said, by the end, I realized I wasn't just hoping for this. I'd been preparing for it all along. Ruth bought that shop, and today, it's not just a place that sells flowers. It's a little sanctuary of beauty and kindness in her neighborhood. Here's the lesson: doubt doesn't mean you're not ready. It just means your heart knows how much this matters. And sometimes, naming those doubts out loud is the very thing that helps them fade away. So if you're feeling unsure right now, know this: it's normal, it's human, and it's a sign that what's waiting for you is worth it, because the things that are easy never stir up doubt. Only the things that are meant to last. As we keep going, let's talk about how the blessings that are finding their way back to you aren't just for you. They're seeds of hope for everyone around you. Let's explore how your quiet miracle can grow into a legacy that reaches beyond your own life. There's something powerful about realizing that your blessings don't stop with you. When you receive a gift, financial or otherwise, it doesn't just fill your cup, it overflows into the lives of everyone around you. My neighbor Harold is a beautiful example of that. A few years ago, after decades of hard work, he finally got a small inheritance from a distant relative. It wasn't a life-changing sum, but it was enough to pay off his medical bills and breathe a little easier. But Harold didn't stop there. He used part of that money to help his daughter pay for her nursing school tuition, and he donated a small portion to his local church's food pantry. He told me, I realized that what was given to me wasn't just for me. It was a chance to pass something forward. And he said that was the best part of it all. Not just the money, but the chance to see how his quiet miracle could lift up other people's lives too. Here's the lesson: the blessings that circle back to you have a way of multiplying when you're willing to share them. It doesn't have to be grand. It could be helping a neighbor fix their porch, giving a little extra to a local charity, or simply showing up for someone who needs a friend. So as you start to see your own financial favor finding its way back, ask yourself, how can this ripple out? How can this become a light that touches more than just my own life? Because in the end, true wealth isn't just about what you keep. It's about what you share. And that brings us to the last part of our story, where we'll bring everything together and talk about how to walk forward in this quiet miracle, one peaceful step at a time. As we reach the end of this journey together, I hope you're feeling something gentle but steady inside you, a quiet reminder that the wealth they tried to steal from you is already making its way back home. Not with fireworks or loud announcements, but with the calm certainty of something that was always yours. I think about my friend Grace. She spent decades feeling like she was always coming up short, never quite catching up, but she kept showing up day after day, believing that even the smallest step was worth taking. A few months ago, she told me, "I finally see it. I finally feel like everything I lost is finding its way back to me in ways I never expected." And she said it with a peaceful smile, the kind that comes when you know you're standing on solid ground. That's the beauty of this quiet miracle. It doesn't need to be shouted from the rooftops. It just needs you to keep believing, to keep listening, and to keep moving forward, one small step at a time. The lesson is this: what's meant for you can't be stolen. It might be delayed, it might be hidden for a while, but it can't be taken away. And when you learn to trust that truth, you walk differently. You move through the world with a quiet kind of courage, knowing that every little sign, every gentle whisper, is a promise that's already unfolding. So, as you step into the next chapter of your life, I want you to carry this blessing with you, that your wealth, whatever that means for you, has been waiting for you all along, and that it's returning, not just to fill your pockets, but to fill your heart with the peace of knowing you were never forgotten. Thank you for sharing this time with me. May you walk forward in faith, in hope, and in the quiet power of knowing that the story isn't over. It's only just beginning.